historic disappearances and the theories that they have spawned. If it disappeared, the hosts of Gone are looking and using in-depth research to figure out what happened. Check out episodes on The Amber Room, D.B. Cooper, and what happened to Oliver Cromwell's head right now. With a new episode coming out every Monday, you can also expect to hear about Hemingway's Lost Manuscript, Blackbeard's Treasure, and many more. Just visit Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, or, well, wherever you go to get your podcasts, and search for Gone. That's Gone, Gone. Or visit parcast.com/Gone to start listening now. That's Parcast, PARCAST.com/Gone to listen now.
All right, we have our whiskey and Guinness and soda pop or whatever now.
No, more Guinness and whiskey.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, cool. Let's talk about theories or suspects or whatever, because it's kind of both.
It's everything.
It's a whole
It's a mixed bag. Let's just call it what it is.
It's everything.
Okay.
It's like, aliens. And,
Yeah.
and
So the first theory that we're going to talk about just really briefly, because it's kind of like nobody really thinks this happened, but fine, is that it was a personal accident caused by Larry on the road with no other human intervention or cover-up whatsoever.
he was drunk.
He was drunk. Yeah.
Yep.
He delicately put his bike down, wandered into the bog, and disappeared forever.
You might have, when you drink a lot, sometimes you have to stop and answer the call of nature,
And listen, I think we've all been there where you are pretty sauced, but there suddenly are some things that you do by rote and very gently and with a little bit of grace, and so you don't just like drop the bike and clatter it on the ground and stumble away. You still stumble, but you could presumably do that. I just would expect that if this were the case, they'd have found something.
Yeah, well, so there are a lot of problems with this, actually. One is they've never found anything.
In the bog.
And that's what Joe was talking about earlier. That was one of the things that they were looking for even as recently as 2012. They were excavating more bogs. They still have not found anything.
Yeah, there was, I believe, also a road in a nearby village near the Strat Valley that was actually being repaved or worked on at the time of the disappearance. And the thinking was that perhaps he'd been buried underneath the road and then he was paved over, essentially. And
they've looked pretty much, even with modern technology.
They still haven't found him. It is, the mystery is still alive in Ireland.
You know what, actually I have a question in regards to this, because Joe brought this up earlier that it was weird that there was no footprints and all of that.
Yeah.
I actually was just suddenly thinking about it. Do we know where specifically it snowed? Because there are times in this town where it will snow in one place and not be snowing 4 or 5 miles away.
It might have only been snowing in Kilmac for all we know.
It could have been.
Yeah.
I was wondering about a kind of a microclimate scenario.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know the answer
yeah.
to that question. I have not heard any accounts of it having snowed in Strad Valley. That is true.
Okay.
But I just assumed that it's all kind of the same.
Yeah, you would think
thing.
that they're close enough that it would be the same, but I just realized that it might
You're
not
right.
have been.
Yeah, what
not
happens at
necessarily.
my house, weather-wise, is totally different than what happens at a lot of other places in Portland. So that's a good thought. One of the other problems with this theory is that, you remember how I was talking about the search and how policemen and civilians and postmen had been searching.
When one of their own disappears, they got to answer the call.
So they did notice the empty mail bag, waterproof coveralls, and a cape were strapped to the bike like you would expect.
Yeah.
For somebody who was at the end of their route. But the way that the cape was strapped to the bike, the postman said was not the way that a seasoned postman would strap a cape to the bike, because it would actually cause cracks the way it was folded up, and it would lose its
It must have been
water
like
retention.
I think it was like rubberized canvas or something.
I think
like
it
that.
was just waxed canvas.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Or even just canvas, for all I know, but I think it was probably waxed canvas. At that time, it seems like that would have been the relatively cheap way to do something like that. But I know that it will crack when, if you fold something up like that, it will start to crack.
In an area that's not meant to take that kind of...
Right. So the feeling is that Larry was seasoned enough that even if he had been really drunk, it just would have been the natural way that he folded that cape would have been the correct way every time, because it would have been the only way he ever folded it.
And I'm sure did it many times.
I'm confident he did a ton of times. So that brings a lot of doubt onto this. And somebody made a note here in my script as well.
Really?
That everything that they found was dry.
Despite contents,
despite the fact that it had apparently been precipitating in some nature overnight. So it would lend itself to seem like it wasn't just laying out all night.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or microclimate.
Or microclimate. It could have been 70 and sunny on Christmas Day in Stroud Valley.
Beyond micro, I mean, it's like tiny, tiny climates, like, just surrounding the bicycle itself.
Yeah.
It was a bicycle climate.
It's like the cartoons.
Yeah.
The cloud just follows the person.
Yeah.
Okay, so pretty much nobody thinks this actually happened.
No.
So let's move on.
You got another theory?
I have a couple other theories, yeah. Next theory is it was a murder. This is where we're going to start adding more details to that night, and then we'll kind of talk about some of the suspects and why it could have or could have not been them. Okay? The Stroud Valley police were hot for a lead that was not them, obviously. They continued to investigate as well while O'Mara was doing his investigation. And they arrested 2 local men, Jim Fitzgerald and Thomas Corbett. Jim was also a local laborer, was 25. Jim had taken Thomas, who's often referred to as Tommy as well. He had taken Tommy and his pregnant girlfriend into his home because they didn't have a place to live.
Tommy's girlfriend.
Yes.
Not Jim's girlfriend.
Yeah, so Tommy and Tommy's girlfriend, who was pregnant, lived with Jim because Jim was a nice person. And
Or he was collecting rent off him.
I mean,
Or
maybe a little, but that was something, it seemed like it was a unique circumstance that he was being
unusual.
Kind. Yes.
Okay.
One thing to stop and mention before we go any further on this is that apparently, at the time, it was illegal for pubs to serve alcohol on Christmas Day and the day after, which is St. Stephen's Day.
And I have revoked the ban on drinking on my day because I personally think that you should drink on my day.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to your narrative, Devin.
Yeah. Oh, and also this particular law was passed, by the way, only in 1927, so just a few years before this incident. So
and you said you did some digging into this, and there were some other days that...
Not a lot, but no, the law, the 1927 law, as far as I know, and again, I didn't investigate extensively, but it banned serving or selling liquor on Good Friday, Christmas Day, and best of all, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Although the St. Patrick's Day ban was actually repealed in 1960.
Yeah.
And just like this past year, 2017, they finally got rid of the ban on liquor sales on Good Friday. So now it's only
Still
Christmas
just
Day.
Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Well, they would be really upset to come to this country and see what we do on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, not so much about snakes, more about just drinking as much as you possibly can.
Yes.
In case it wasn't clear earlier, as we mentioned, Whelan's is a pub. Whelan's Pub.
Yep.
Still is to this day.
I think the original owner's grandson is running it now.
I think it's still a family that runs it.
Is. Yeah.
I'm not totally clear if it was also an inn at the time or just a pub, or if they just maybe had like a little extra room.
Well, it's a 2-story building, and probably the family lived on the second floor.
But the question
bedroom.
becomes because so the reason that I bring this question up even is because, as mentioned, DeLay seemed to think that there might be room for Larry to sleep it off in Whelan. So I don't know if he just seemed to think maybe they had a little extra room in the house, or if they actually did, that was a thing they offered, was a room or two to sleep it off in.
And that actually, if you think about it from a pub's perspective, that is a great money-making avenue.
Sure.
Basically a closet with a teeny cot that's easy to clean off, and you charge the drunk a couple of pence and push him in and say, "See you in the morning, dummy, don't come out." And if he comes out, you say, "Oh, you want to go back in there? It's a couple of pence more." I mean, That is just cheap and easy.
Oh yeah,
Or
I would
it-
absolutely do that.
Oh
Or
yeah,
it
it's
might
called
just-
drunk tax.
And it might actually just be something they provided for free. It's just good customer service, you know. Well, your
Yeah, I think it was unlikely that somebody was going to drive home.
not in those
There was
days.
only one car in town.
Yeah, and it was the police car. I'm kidding. I actually don't know how many.
Only
There was
one car.
Okay.
According to a
So you
lot of
know.
the articles I read, the only car in town belonged to, and I don't remember who it was, but they
Thomas-
always said it was the only car in town.
Thomas Cashin.
Yeah.
Yes,
the guy's
that's who it
name.
was.
And
Oh,
he,
yeah.
and he, by the way, lives right across the street from Whelan's Pub.
Well, it was hard to not live right across the street from
I
Whelan's.
know, that's true too. Yeah.
The size of it. But Whelan's, like we said, still in operation today. They still have very strong feelings about this. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Apparently, they don't like to hear about it.
But they're also still very much just serve the local community, and that's that. So I think that's probably how it was there as well.
Yeah,
Then-
I'm sure you can go to Whelan's Pub now as a tourist and go in and have a drink. I'm sure they'll
I actually
serve you.
read there's one single Yelp review of Whelan's.
Oh, is there?
There is. And it was from somebody who was from America and who was touring through, and they said, we saw Whelan's, and it was a pub, and we were driving through, and we needed some place to stop, so we stopped, and we went in, and it was clear that we were not welcome since we were not local.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But they stayed. They said that they gave it a good review. I mean, but they were like, it was clear we did not fit in.
Did
so.
they at least serve them a little liquor or
I don't
beer
know.
or something?
I didn't. Yeah. Anyway, we're a little off topic here. So Jim and Tommy, both admitted to having been at Whelan's that night and to having seen Larry. Jim's story was that another man named Morrissey had pushed Larry over maybe a dispute over some money, hit his head on a stove, and
He pushed him hard enough to knock him over.
Well,
And so then he-
reportedly it was not so hard to knock Larry over that night.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
He actually knocked himself over a number of times walking
Yeah.
through the hall.
Yeah, if he had been sober, he would not have fallen.
Yeah, but apparently he fell over and hit his head on a stove and died.
okay.
And you can read the actual account from Jim of this, and it's kind of hard to follow. It's pretty conversationally wandering.
A little bit, yeah.
But that's, as far as I can surmise, that's what happened in his story. Tommy's story was a little different. His story was that they had gone to Whelan's but hadn't been allowed in for whatever reason. Maybe their capacity, maybe it was when the sergeant was kind of around. Because again, they were serving liquor.
and they were
which was
supposed
illegal.
to, so you had to keep it on the down low.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. So the way it's described, like Fitzgerald and Tommy, it sounds like they went in the back way, and they didn't actually. It sounds like Tommy did not actually go into the bar area.
Well-
He just stood in the kitchen drinking, and I'm not sure why that was. It's all.
Yeah,
that's
again-
local custom or something. I don't know what it was.
Or they were full in the other room, or the sergeant.
Yeah.
So in the original telling of the story, when O'Mara finally went and interviewed the police officers for the first time, they claimed that they had been to Whelan's. Actually, I think it was a couple times after he interviewed them, because somebody was like, we saw them going into Whelan's that night. And the police officer said, yeah, we were doing raids.
Yeah.
We were doing raids.
Yeah.
Did it twice.
In other words,
Did
just
two raids.
barging in and checking to make sure no illicit drinking was going on.
Right, which was maybe not actually the reason.
They were raiding the place. They were raiding the
for
bottles
alcohol.
of booze.
Yeah,
Maybe
but
that
it
too.
could have been that was, the moment that the sergeant was in and the Whelan's said,
Yeah.
well, we're just, for whatever reason, I don't really know what, but they were in this kind of back room. And that was Jim's story. Tommy's story was that they had actually not been allowed in at first. So they went across to the hall, which is across the way, as Joe mentioned, which was basically just another place where people drank and then they played cards. And Tommy had gotten into a fight with somebody there. The story of the fight is actually corroborated by a number of people.
It's one of the few things that everybody seems to know for certain
to
happened
agree
that
on.
night.
Yeah. And so I don't really know where the truth is in these stories. I don't even know if it's possible. It's certainly possible, I guess, that they were both sloshed. And Jim went to Whelan's and was like, Tommy's right behind me. And Tommy, for whatever reason, was like, well, I'm going over to the hall. Or they were like, Tommy, you can't come in here. So he went over, got in a fight, and came back and thought Jim was with him the whole time. I don't really know.
And Jim is like, where's Tommy? He
Yeah.
was just here all
Yeah.
night long.
How do you lose your buddy in a village that size?
I think you're just drunk and you're not paying attention. I don't know.
Celebrating.
guess.
Yeah. But like I said, pretty much everybody has changed their stories a number of times, and that includes both Jim and Tommy.
Which is so very frustrating.
It's super frustrating.
Because there's just nothing consistent.
Yeah, so this
from one day to the next.
And this is actually where we get into this a little bit. The police arrested Tommy Cashane, the car owner, and Ned Morrissey, both right after the interview, based on the testimony of Jim, because they said that Thomas Cashane was also there.
Yeah, and he also, I think, as part of his testimony, he said that someone said that, like maybe it was Thomas Cashane, said that he was going to bring his car, they'd put the body in there and get rid of it. So that's why. And
only car.
Yeah, the only car in town.
Yeah, because there's not really like a development on that story necessarily. The story kind of ends with, well, Morrissey pushed him and he fell, and then everybody around was kind of like, whatever, like he'll get up, and then somebody said, oh, he's dead, and then somebody else was yelling at him to get up, and
I think Morrissey turned him over, and then said get up, and he just never moved, except
for that right after that. This is why Jim's story, it's very frustrating, because he says Morrissey turned him over and there was a little blood but not much, and Morrissey said get up, and he never moved again, but he was mumbling about, and it was like, well, wait, what, was he mumbling about something, or was he dead? I don't understand what was happening. But
part of the reason for Jim Fitzgerald's confusion on the whole matter was, it turns out that he told another police officer quite a long time after this, like months afterward, that actually he had not been there and had not witnessed this.
That he had just heard it.
He said he heard it third hand from somebody who was there. So
So that's why Thomas Cashane and Ned Morrissey were arrested at first, and the police seemed to think they could get some kind of conviction based on Jim's original testimony, and maybe they thought some other people who had been in the pub. They named so many people. There were a lot of people.
It was like 10, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think 8, 10, but there were the Whelans. I think I think 4 of the Whelan family were arrested.
Well, so
2 policemen and several other
Exactly.
people.
So they arrested Thomas and Ned, and then charged them with like theft of postman property or something.
Postal property.
Yeah, something like that.
That's then a crime in the U.S. also.
Yeah. A few days later, yes, it is, though there's no really evidence to suggest that they actually did steal anything. I mean, the bike and everything was returned, and maybe it was the uniform. I think it was the hat specifically they were charging them for.
Maybe.
But
there was something about the mailbag, too, but I don't remember if the mailbag was with the bike. It was,
It was, yeah.
So but it might have been actually just touching it. Maybe it might be that if you're not a member of the post office, you're not even allowed to handle that mailbag.
I hope that's not true in America.
Actually, it is. If you kick a mailbag in America, you can go to jail.
Kick it or handle it?
If you just kick it, if you abuse a mailbag in any way, that's actually a federal crime.
If you stroke it lovingly and pet it like a
I was
going
to say, I used to have to move a mailbag to clean my house, so hopefully just picking a mailbag up was not a thing.
You probably won't get arrested for it, just if they really want to.
But we'll call it out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, why don't you inquire on my behalf?
I will.
Let them know where we live now.
I will.
Great, cool. So so a few days later, after Thomas and Ned were arrested, I think it was 4. You're right, of the Whelans.
Yeah, mom and dad and 2 of their children.
And 2 of their kids.
Yeah.
Then on February 3rd, officers Dulé and Murphy were arrested and charged, though I'm not totally sure how Murphy was the one that got wrapped up in that, because it sounded like it was Frawley that was the one that was actually wrapped up in it.
Actually hanging out with Larry. Yeah.
And then on March 7th, they were all let go after some kind of trivial trial time.
Well, they weren't let go per se. They were all reassigned to other areas around the country, or other precincts, I thought.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. All of the people that I just listed that had been arrested and charged. I'm
sorry.
They tried them all together.
I'm sorry.
In one single trial, and the judge was like, okay, you got to give me more than this, O'Mara. Like, you can't just give me one guy who's somehow changed his story sitting on the stand.
Well, and the crazy thing about the trial was that they kept moving things out by, we need another week or 2 to get this, and we need another week. 6 or 8 weeks?
No, about 4. But originally it was supposed to be kind of a quick thing, and then Jim Fitzgerald comes in to testify.
It goes sideways on
That's
him.
when he changed his story, which actually it turns out the story was sort of BS because he claimed to have been there when he never was, probably. And he says, well, I didn't really see that stuff. So in a sense, he was almost telling the truth, although it looked like he